for your business idea in that competition. The deadline is October 30th for that, so end of the month. It's a Friday. So you've got a little bit more time, but that one's a little bit more involved. You need to do a 3-page executive summary, up to 3-page executive summary, and a 2-minute video. The Bootstrap application is just an online application. It'll take maybe 15 minutes to fill it out. If you've got questions about either of those, please send me a message on Canvas. Let's set up a time to meet, and I can talk to you more about that. So again, it's Bootstrap, due this Sunday. Opportunity Quest, due October 30th. And if you are going to enter Opportunity Quest, next Tuesday at 12:30, we've got a launch lunch. I know not all of you can make it, so we're going to try to film it and put it up on the Opportunity Quest website afterwards. But if you can make it, it's a free lunch, and we're going to talk all about how to win Opportunity Quest. Tips to make better videos, tips to write effective executive summaries, and how to pitch. That's next Tuesday, 12:30 in the Grit Center. So, now I'd like to introduce our guest speaker today. I'm really glad that Keith Bailey can be here. Keith was born and raised in Ephraim and is a proud graduate of Snow College. So we've got a Badger with us today. Yeah, that's right, Badger pride. After Snow College, he went on to earn a degree in business with an emphasis in accounting from Utah State University. So I guess, does that make you a Baggie? You're a Badger and an Aggie. So he's a true Baggie. Keith and his wife, Jenny, currently live north of Moroni, Utah, with their 4 daughters. So he's totally outnumbered, but he loves it. Keith is the vice president of Bailey Farms International, an export company that specializes in exporting hay and agricultural products to the Middle and Far East. Owner of Overland Logistics, which specializes in freight between California and Utah. And owner of Bailey Racing, competing as a professional snowmobile racer in the Rocky Mountain Snowmobile Hillclimb Association. So please welcome Keith Bailey.
Thanks. Oh, we already got a mic drop. So. You're not
supposed to drop it before you're done.
Hey, is the microphone working? Everybody can hear me? All right, thanks for having me here today, guys. I'm excited to give you a little presentation here on some of the things that I've done and been involved in business. And so I hope that I can give you something that's worthwhile, either maybe some good information on starting your own business or getting going, or at least if I'm boring, I can give you a good nap. So we'll see what happens here. As I get going, I was telling Russ before we started, he's asking if I was nervous or not, and I thought, no, I'm not too nervous. You guys seem like a pretty good crowd, but if my voice gets a little bit shaky, the only thing I'm worried about, I guess I'm a little self-conscious, is my vocal cord, my right vocal cord quit moving back in March, and I couldn't talk for a little while. Now it's getting better, so if you hear my voice shaking, I promise I'm not getting emotional. It's just the vocal cord not working. So just to start out, as I was thinking about what I wanted to present and things, I really got thinking about a lot of things, but I thought about myself, just like you guys here at Snow College, going through the business program. Doesn't seem like that many years ago to me. To you guys, I'm probably getting pretty old. But as I thought about it, I thought, okay, what would I want to know when I was in your shoes? And so that's what I really wanted to start out with. As I was preparing this at first, I thought, well, I'm going to tell you kind of about my businesses and things, and then maybe we'll get into that. I thought, no, really the important thing is what are you guys here for? What do you want to know, and what do you want to get out of this presentation? And so I decided to prepare it a little bit different. I'm going to hit some of these bullet points right at first. To give you guys some time to think about it, and maybe think about questions that you might have in a direction you'd like me to go with the presentation as well. So first of all, what do you want to learn here in the class today? I want you to think about this for a minute. What are you really here for? Are you here just to get a check mark by the box and say, hey, I got an A and I got this class? Or do you really want to take some time and learn something? And I would suggest to you, and this is one of the things I wish that I had done better in college, is that you're paying to be here, right? Every one of you paid tuition Either that or you got a scholarship or something like that, but you paid for that by your efforts in getting that scholarship. So you're investing not only money, but also your time and being here. So what do you want to get out of that? If you're going to be here anyways, you might as well get something out of it, right? So try to get the most out of your education and make a good return on your investment. And I would suggest that in any of your classes, if you're in there just to get a grade, you're probably just really wasting your time, right? So make sure that you're getting the most out of your classes by putting in the time and the effort. And then also, I always compare it to, if you go to a nice restaurant, you don't go in there and sit down and say like, hey, just give me whatever you got. I'm just trying to get dinner done with and checked off and move on, right? You go in there, if you're going to pay for it, you order what you want. And so make sure you're getting what you want out of your classes and this class today. And so in saying that, if you've got a question that I'm not talking about, or something I'm talking about you want to learn more about, or you have a question about that, feel free to raise your hand, interrupt me, whatever, because what I really want to do is make sure that I'm giving you what you want so you can get what you're paying for today, okay? If you're in the back and I'm on a roll and not really paying attention, do whatever, get my attention, stand up, holler, throw something at me, depending on what it is. But anyways, make sure that you're going to get the most out of what we're doing today. So to start off, like I said, things I wish that I had known when I was in your spot, sitting here at Snow College. And this is a question that I've got a lot over the years is, when should I start my business? When's the best time to start my business? Should I put it off? What should I do? So my answer is the best time to start is now, especially for you guys as Snow College students. And I'll give you a couple reasons for that. First of all, there's no refund on time, right? Starting a business is going to take time. Getting a business to grow takes time. So the sooner that you can start, the better. That doesn't mean go out today and open up an LLC or whatever you're wanting to do, but start on the business plan and get going. The other thing is that if you're going to start a business, there's always, and this kind of goes to my point number 2, but there's always risk involved, right? And your greatest risk is going to be when you have the most to lose. And so you guys are college students, right? You're kind of scraping by, and at least when I was there, it was kind of living day to day and getting as much free food as I can and eating a lot of ramen noodles. And so it didn't really take a whole lot for me to sustain myself. And so I didn't really have as much to lose. Now if I look at it and fast forward 10 years down the road, and if you're married, you've got a family, you've got a house payment, you've got all these responsibilities, now you've got more risk. And so there's more to risk by saying, okay, I'm going to go out and start my own business, especially if you're thinking, okay, I'm going to quit my job and start my own business. Your risk is higher then than it is now. One of the big challenges for small businesses is funding, and as you start a business, most often it takes some time. Often it'll take a year or two to really become profitable. And so if you're planning on living off of that income, if you're trying to live at the level you are now, it's much easier than when you have a steady salary that you're used to make those obligations that you have. And so I think starting early is a really good thing. The other thing I would suggest is, and we may have to have your teacher plug his ears here for a minute. I'm all for education, and I think that education is great and really value the education that I got, but you're going to learn more out there in the field doing business than you will sitting in class learning about it. And so I think that's another good reason to get started, get going now, even if it's not the business that you eventually see yourself doing. If you have a side business or something you want to do part-time, you're going to learn a lot more about business, actually being out there in the world, dealing with the types of things that business owners are dealing with. And so it's another good reason to really get started now. Of course, as I mentioned, business involves risk. One of the things that I see is, as I've looked at myself, as well as other individuals that I've talked to, there's a lot of people I talk to, and I had this business idea, but I never did it. And why didn't we do it? And a lot of times it's because we're afraid to take the chance. And so that's why I say in here, the fear of failure will kill more businesses than failure will, because we never start them. And so don't be afraid to start. Don't be afraid to go out and start your business and go out on your own. And I would suggest also, don't let anybody tell you what will and will not work. and we'll get to this in a minute when we talk about a business plan, but go in and decide for yourself. If you have something that you really want to do, go in there, work through the process of creating a business plan, and see if it'll work. Don't let other people discourage you. If I think back when I was in high school, and I don't know if it's like this still, but when I entered high school as a freshman, they had you come in, and I met with a counselor with one of my parents. And they kind of talked about where you wanted to go, what you wanted to do with your life, and then they would kind of tailor your classes that way. And so we went in and we sat down with this counselor, and at the time, my dad was farming, and we were just starting this export business that we'll talk about here in a minute. And so in my young freshman mind, when they asked me what I wanted to be, I told them I wanted to be a farmer. And she laughed at me. And she stops laughing at me. My mom were looking at each other like, okay, what's this all about? My grandpa was actually a farmer and fairly successful. And she said, are you serious? And I said, yeah. She said, well, that's going to be hard to make a living being a farmer. Have you thought about doing anything else? And I told her no. And anyways, I just have thought a lot about that experience. And if I had taken that, kind of the advice that I got there, maybe look into something else, maybe I wouldn't have been able to do some of the things I've been able to do as we've turned our agriculture, our farm into a business. And so don't let anybody tell you can't do it. I'm not telling you that anything that you can dream up and you want to do will work. You need to prepare a good business plan to make sure it's going to work. And so let's move on to how do I start my business. And I would say that the business plan is going to be vital. And I don't know how much you guys have talked about that in your classes, but having a good, accurate business plan is going to be vital for the success of your business. Most businesses, I think the number's right around 50%, are going to fail within the first 4 or 5 years of starting a business. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but I think that one of the number one reasons they fail, especially the ones that fail in the first year, is because you didn't have a good, accurate business plan. If it doesn't work on paper, it's not going to work in real life. I've seen a lot of people that they have this idea and they go through, they put the numbers down, it doesn't turn out just how they want it to, and so they say, well, I just feel like it's going to work though. And those are the businesses that typically fail, because if it doesn't work on paper, it's not going to work in real life. It doesn't mean what you put on paper is always going to be accurate, but it's almost always more optimistic than what real life is. And so as you put it together, what do you need in a business plan? Well, it depends on your business, but there's a couple of key things that you're going to need to identify. First of all, you need to identify the market. You need to understand the market. A lot of businesses fail because they don't properly understand the market, what the product or service is selling for, who's buying it, what quantities are they buying it in. It may be something that you're really interested in, so it takes all of your time, but are there a lot of other people that are involved in that? What kind of market is there? And then how are you going to enter that market? What are you going to do? Is the market already saturated? Are there people out there in the market? In most cases, there are going to be people out there in the market. And so how are you going to differentiate yourself from those other people that are in the market? You want to be able to differentiate yourself. There's many ways to do it depending on your product or service. Is it price? Is it going to be quality? Is it going to be service? Just some way to differentiate yourself from others in the market. If you can identify that, that's going to be a real benefit for you in your product or service. A business plan also needs to include all the expenses, and this is where I see a lot of people get off as well. As I dealt with a company a little while ago, and they were getting started, and they had identified and they put together their business plan, but they were working on, so they were selling a product, they were working on gross margin. It was a very high volume business, and so they went in and they put together their plan based on, I can buy the product for X amount of dollars, I can ship it for this many dollars, and this is going to be my return. And they had like a 20% profit margin that they thought was pretty good because of the volume they were going to be moving. And they just assumed that all of the overhead, so the costs that you couldn't associate directly with the product, would be taken care of with that 20%. And they went into it, and the business lost money month over month over month because they didn't correctly identify all of their expenses. They thought the tedious expenses like office expenses and printers and paper and all of these little things would just kind of wash out in that 20%. So you really want to get detailed on what it's going to cost you for your product or service, and you need to be looking at the net margins there. What's left at the end of the day once all expenses are paid. Sometimes that's hard because you get looking from kind of a broad perspective to go in and say what's going to happen day to day. And for me personally, the best way for me to do that is I start thinking about the business and what I'm going to do, and just start thinking about, okay, what am I going to do on a day-to-day basis? What's the day-to-day things that need to be done, and what are the expenses associated with that? And as you walk through that, a lot of times you'll start to catch those little things that oftentimes you miss, and make sure that you're going to make a profit. And this is especially important as you're starting your business, to get through that first year or two, to make sure you make that profit. So those are just a couple ideas on starting a business and really getting an accurate business plan. Any questions on that? Anybody got any specific questions so far? Nobody's jumping up and down or throwing anything at me, so I'm assuming there's not. So the last thing is, as you start your business, and this is something that I've learned, especially as our business has grown, that I wish that I had done better early on when it started, but having KPIs or key performance indicators in your business. Now, whatever your business is, that's gonna change based on your business and what you're doing. But key performance indicators are any number that you can look at almost on a daily basis to see the health and the progress of your company. Okay, so in our companies, we review our financial statements once a month. And so, that's a pretty good time frame to do it. Some do it quarterly, some do it just yearly. We do it once a month, and then we'll close them out quarterly and yearly as well. But in between those monthly financial statements, I need to be able to have some key performance indicators to tell me where I'm going, so I don't wait till the end of the month and then all of a sudden realize that I've got a problem. And especially managing several different entities, it's really important to be able to have those indicators, and each business is different on those key performance indicators. And I'll talk a little bit more about those as I talk about the specific businesses. So those are really the things that I thought of that I really wish that I had known. So now if you're ready to fall asleep, you got the important stuff, I guess. So we'll move on. As Russ mentioned, Bailey Farms International, this is the company that takes the bulk of my time. Bailey Farms International is a company that we started in agriculture over 30 years ago. This is a company that my dad and uncle started back in the mid-1980s. And so I was just a young kid back then. This is actually a picture of me and my friend. I figured the history will pull out an old picture. I was probably 13 years old or so, and thought that farming was the coolest thing on earth. And so me and one of my friends worked on the farm and worked just as many hours as we possibly could. We loved it. But the business started, really, my uncle was in the oil industry, and he lived over in Denver, Colorado. He had come back with my dad and some of their brothers, and they were actually out pheasant hunting. They were trying to pheasant hunt. And everywhere the pheasants were, it seemed like it was private property. And they got thinking that, boy, it'd be nice to own some land to be able to hunt some pheasants on. And so they went looking for some land, and that's really how they started. They started buying land. I mentioned my grandpa was a farmer. That's on my mom's side. He had a dairy farm. So on the Bailey side, there wasn't really any farming background there. And they started to invest in land in the 1980s. Land was cheap, interest rates were high, and so it was really a buyer's market if you had the ability to buy land. And so they started investing in this land and putting pieces together little by little. My dad was actually in school at the time studying engineering. And that he had a job lined up to move to Denver and go to work. And towards the end of his schooling, he got thinking, I don't know that I really want to live in Denver. He's kind of used to this small town life here in Sanpete County, and decided maybe he'd want to try and make a career and make a living here. And so he went back and they started putting this farm ground together, and he decided that maybe they'd have him run the farm. And so that's what they did. They started to accumulate these properties and put them together. A lot of them were undeveloped or underdeveloped, and so he would go in and they would purchase the property and start to develop it, put in sprinkler systems and so on. And it was really fun. It was exciting. He loved the work and really began to love agriculture. And as he did this, he thought, boy, this is a lot of fun, but it'd be nice to maybe make a little bit more money, or at least have a consistent market where we could sell our hay. That's what we were doing, is primarily growing hay. And so as he looked around, most of the hay was going to dairy farms, mostly in California, and the need would fluctuate based on milk prices or availability of corn and other products. And so one year it might be really good, the other year it was very difficult to make money or collect payments or whatever. And so he thought there's got to be a better way to do this. And so he started going out there and doing some research, and they came along this market exporting hay, so taking hay and compressing it down and then shipping it across the ocean to different countries. And really the real purpose for that is just to maximize the space in the shipping container. So it's really a big logistics play more than anything. And they went in, they hired somebody to do some market research and looked into it. They went around to different companies that were already doing it. It started out as a cubing process, and they moved on from there and decided, hey, let's jump into this. They went in and found somebody that had a machine that was able to do this, and they started cubing hay. So fast forward a little bit, as far as the farming operation goes, we have 3 farms. We've got our original farm here in Ephraim. We've got one up by Snowmobile, Utah, and then we've got one over in northern California, just south of the Oregon border in Siskiyou County. This picture is from the farm in California. It's just right at the base of Mount Shasta, if any of you know where that is. And so we've got about 10,000 acres under management right now, irrigated acres, and so that's the farming portion of the operation. As far as the processing facilities, and I'll explain a little bit more about this, got some pictures because it's really foreign to a lot of people, but we have 3 processing facilities. We've got one here in Ephraim. We've got one up in Tremont, in Utah, just south of Tremont, actually, in Bear River City, if anybody's from up there. And then we've got one over in Delta, Utah. And each of these facilities, the idea and the gist of it is we take hay, grown on our farm, which is only about maybe 10% of what we produce, and then we buy from about 600 farmers throughout Utah, mostly Utah and Idaho, some in Nevada as well. We take the hay, so you've seen the hay bales out in the field, right? And we take that into these processing facilities. This is our Delta hay plant. And you take it in there, and we've got big machines that take the hay, they shred it up, and then they compress it down. And so it's about 50% more dense than what it is in a hay bale. And again, that's just so that we can get more bales in a container, and it makes the freight cheaper. I started talking about, okay, so this is our 3 products that we primarily do. We've got cubes, 30 kilogram bales, so that's roughly 60 pounds. And then 450 kilogram bales, which are 900 to 1,000 pounds. This is one of the machines that produces the 450 kilogram bale that you can see in the picture there. And let's see. Yeah, there's the cubes right there. So that was the first product that we started with, was the cube. So this is taking the hay in, grinding it up, and then it presses it through some dies. So if you think of like Play-Doh that you used to play with, maybe you still play with it, I don't know. And they have the little dies, and you shove it through, and it makes like a star or whatever. But that's really the general idea, is that you have these dies, and you've got a square hole, and you've got a compressor wheel that comes around, and it shoves that hay through it after it's ground up, and it's mixed with some bentonite clay, and it comes out in a cube like this. This is the product that we started with, and we started selling this product primarily to Japan. As we were doing it, one of the things in your business is, as you go with your business plan, start to execute that, but always be willing to look for opportunities to improve and to be flexible. And so one of the advantages that we were able to gain as we started selling this product to Japan is we ended up hooking up with this company that said, okay, look, we're going to buy your cubes from you, but you need to let us help you with the shipping. And what we were doing is just like everybody else, and we would start here, and you'd line up the shipping as if you were shipping something from the U.S. to Japan. And he says there's a way more efficient way to do this, and we're going to work the system backwards. So we're going to say, like, we're starting in Japan, and we're bringing it from the United States. And because of that, it was able to create some efficiencies that the other companies didn't have. And so again, that's a differentiation from what everybody else was doing. That helped us to really gain a competitive advantage, which was really vital when we were first in the business. Now, as the business has grown, obviously, as you start doing something more efficient, people are going to learn how to do that, and now everybody's kind of shipping that way, and even the shipping programs have moved that direction. So good competitive advantage for several years, though, as we were starting the business. Okay, so the other 2 products that we talked about was a 30 kg bale. So here's that's a 60 pound bale, and then a 450 kg bale. And this is 3 of them stacked up. It's wrapped up with a poly sleeve. And so these are, if any of you guys are in the ag program, you may have been out to our hay press. I know they come out for tours quite often. But anyways, these are compressed, pretty dense. If you cut that sleeve off, it's just gonna go poof, and you'll have hay all over the place. But those are the 3 main products that we sell. Where the products are going primarily to the Pacific Rim, so China, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and then to the Middle East, to countries like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and some of those countries. And it's kind of a unique business. It's one of those that you don't hear about every day. Why would we be shipping hay clear overseas? And the reason is because they can't grow the product in their countries for whatever reason. The hay is primarily fed to dairy cows, so it's going to the dairy farms, and they're using that to feed the cows and then process milk, yogurt, cheese, and products like that. The reason that they're shipping in hay is mostly because of their climate. So if you look at like a country like Taiwan or Japan or Korea, one, they have very low land mass, and then 2, their climate's not really conducive to growing and drying hay, and so it's too wet. If you look at a country like China, they've got a bigger land mass. They've got some other issues that prohibit them from growing the amount of hay that they need. They do grow some forage products there. One of them is the climate still in areas. It's kind of interesting. If you look up like towards Mongolia on the China-Mongolia border, that area is similar to the Rocky Mountain West here. So you would think that they could grow hay there. They went in and started to plant hay. And in the winter time, they get snow, and then they get a bunch of wind. The wind will blow all the snow off. And what they found is they'd plant the alfalfa hay. The wind would come in and blow all the dirt from around the roots, and then the roots exposed, and the plant would die. They have other areas where they can grow hay. It's kind of interesting. Visiting China is really an interesting place. The infrastructure is really quite good. If you're in the cities, it's pretty amazing, the train systems and the roadways and things like that. But when you get out away from the cities, it's almost like a whole other country, and the infrastructure isn't as good, and so it'll actually cost more to grow the hay in some of these areas and ship them into the more urban areas where they have the dairies than it does to ship it from the United States clear over there. And so that's another reason why they're buying the hay. And then when you get into the Middle East, and you're talking about the Middle East, of course it's extremely dry and desert there. They are able to grow some forage products there, but they really are limited. They're mostly by the water, and they want to use the water for human consumption and products that humans eat rather than feeding the cows. And so this is another really interesting thing on the business that we're involved in, is a lot of these countries, they look at the procurement of food products as a national security issue. And that's one of the things that I've really enjoyed about the business as I've gone through it, that I've learned, is that the United States, in my opinion, our greatest natural resource is our ability to produce food and feed our people. Because I deal with all these countries that can't do that. They're importing food products. And so they see that if there was ever contentions between countries, you hear of trade wars on the news. We've been involved with some of those, especially with our products going to China. But if we were ever to shut down or quit exporting food or agricultural products, there's a lot of countries that would suffer because they can't produce it all on their own, whereas the United States is just the opposite, and we can produce that. So if you think about it, we may import a lot of things from other countries, but when it comes down to it and times are tough, it's kind of hard to eat a computer chip. So we're really in a pretty good position here in the United States, and it is nice to have the ability to help these countries around the world that do need these products. So the last thing on Bailey Farms, and probably one of the most crucial elements, is shipping. So how does the hay get from little old Ephraim, Utah, all the way across the ocean? And what it does is we have these shipping containers. You can see these vessels here that are full of shipping containers, and then the picture at the top left is us loading a container at our facility. So the product will get loaded into a container. It's taken by truck up to the railhead up in Salt Lake City. It's put on a train. Then from there it goes down to California to one of the ports, and then it's taken from there and put on ship, and then it sails across the ocean, and they pick it up from there. And so that's it. That's really a big part of what we do is the logistics of making all that move, and that's a key portion of our business. So I just want to stop for a second. Any questions? I've really been on a roll here. Yep. So there's a few ports in California. If it's going via the rail, which we try and move most of our product that way, it's going to go to Oakland. And then there's some of it that goes on truck, and that's going to go down to Long Beach. And then from there, if it goes on a truck, then it will get transloaded is what they call it. So they're going to take it out of the truck and then put it into a container and then go on the ship. And so there's two reasons why we like to do it via rail as much as we can. And that one is because when we put the product in the container, we put the seal on the container, it doesn't get opened until it gets to our customers. Whereas when we do it on the truck, it's got to go down and we've got to have a third party transload that. And so we lose a little bit of control of our product. We have some really good transloading companies that we work with, and so it works pretty seamlessly, but we always like to have control of our product. Two is it's a little bit cheaper to go through Salt Lake. The main reason that we don't put everything through Salt Lake is because there's just not enough containers available for the volumes that we ship out. So, thanks. Good question. Anybody else? Oh, I see one back there. The biggest mistake that our company's made? Oh boy, let's see. There's probably too many mistakes to think of. You know, there's a lot of different things that we do. Some of them are just those inadvertent mistakes. You get the wrong product, say in a container, and it gets overseas. And there's a lot of issues that you deal with there, especially dealing with two different countries. Because here in the United States, it's a lot simpler if you're dealing within the country. You're in the same jurisdiction, using the same legal system. Whereas if you get overseas, now you're talking about different countries, different jurisdictions and laws, and so it makes things a little bit more complicated. I could think of several different things. I mean, I'll give you an example. China has more regulations on genetically modified products. For alfalfa hay, it's mostly Roundup Ready hay. And so on occasion, you'll get, usually at a transload facility, but sometimes even at our facility, if somebody puts the wrong hay in a container and it gets over there, and now all of a sudden it's tested positive for GMO or genetically modified products. And so you've got to figure out what to do with that. It's a huge expense to ship it back over here. The freight coming from the Far East to the U.S. is a lot higher than it is from the U.S. over there. And so usually what we're trying to do in that situation is try and strategically move it to another area there in the Middle East or the Far East. So if it went to China, our preference would be to send it to like Taiwan or Japan or something like that. The problem is there's some contention between those countries, and so if it has Chinese writing on it, they're not going to sell it in China or in Japan or Taiwan, and so we've had to move that to the Middle East. And so it's up to our sales force to go out there and make the best sell they can and mitigate the loss. So that would be one of the mistakes that I would say that we've seen in the past, and how we've mitigated that. Another mistake and kind of a learning curve as you get going in doing international business, especially that's different than doing it here, is how are you going to get your payment? And if you don't get your payment, what are you going to do about it? Okay, and so there's sometimes when we've gone in, you sign a contract, you do a deal, you send the hay overseas, and then you don't get payment. It's a little bit harder to say, okay, here I'm just going to send this to a collection agency, or I'm going to take you to court because you're in separate countries. And so if the number's not large enough, you really just end up losing the profit. And so one of the things that we do is all of our sales, especially in China, that's probably the most difficult country to deal with, is all of our sales are done on an LC, or a line of credit, issued by the bank. And so the way this works is you've got our bank, so we use U.S. Bank, and they'll go and they have a list of banks that they work with in other countries, and the banks are tiered. And so U.S. Bank will only work with the top tier banks with other countries. And when you put together an LC contract, you put your contract and all the documentation and the specifications of how you're going to get paid and what you need to do to get paid. And then at that point, once LC is entered into, our customer will make an agreement with their bank that they're going to pay the bank, or a lot of times they have to put some money up front. And then once we ship the product and the product arrives and we get the documentation and submit it to our bank, the payment is automatically triggered between their bank and our bank, and then their bank will go to the customer. And so once I have that LC in place, as long as I meet the conditions of the contract and submit those documents, I'll get paid no matter what. And so that's one of the ways that we've secured our payment overseas. And so there's a few different ways to do that for us in our business. That's probably the easiest way to do it and the best way, especially with the volumes that we're doing. There are some things if you're in a startup business and you're at a smaller scale. A lot of people will work with the Exim Bank, which is the Export-Import Bank here in the United States, and they have options as well for you to be able to secure your products if you're in an international market. So did that help? Did that give you some kind of idea? Okay. Any other questions? Don't think I'm missing anybody. Okay. So let's move on. The next company is a company that I started with a couple of my partners, and this company is similar. So this is really starting and taking synergies that we had already with things that we had going with Bailey Farms International, and we started a company called Overland Logistics. And we move all kinds of freight. We can do just about anything truck freight-wise, but what we specialize in is the lane between here, really between the Wasatch Front and California. So Utah is a net importer, not a net exporter, so they import more product than they export. And so a lot of times when freight comes up from California, it goes back empty and causing an extra cost because they've got to recuperate the profit on the haul up. And so what we did is we have all these containers that are going out full of hay. And what we did is we went in and we started contacting people in the state that were importing products from California, and especially ones that were more of a time-sensitive nature. Most of these were going in these containers and coming up on the rail and then getting taken to them. And what we did is went and provided an option that really wasn't widely available for these companies, and that is to get your container faster. It would come into the port. We would take the trucks that we've got down there, we'd load the container onto the truck, and then we would haul it up here. And then what we could do is turn around and fill it with hay and send it back down to California. And so this really opened up an opportunity for us to expand into some of these companies that are started to locate here in Utah, like Overstock.com, Orbit Products, and some of these other companies up along the Wasatch Front, to provide them with a fairly cost-competitive alternative to the rail, but it gives them their product quicker. And so that's, again, differentiating our service from the service that was available, which is the rail, and really it's the time that we offer them. And so there's a little bit of a surcharge for that, but it's not extremely high. And the reason is because we can give them the round trip. The other thing is we're able to get trucking rates better because the trucks always love to be able to just be loaded round trip and go. It takes a lot less time for them to do scheduling and finding different loads. And so that's really how that company was born, was out of that idea. Now, a couple of things that we did, and part of our business plan to allow this company to grow. As I said, a lot of times as companies start, the profit margins are low as you get going. And so one of the benefits that we had, and a lot of you guys might find yourself in this situation where, okay, you're out there and you're already running a company, or you've got a job or something like that, and you want to start a business on the side. And this is an example of that type of company where we all had our income. There's 3 of us that started this company, and we had our income. So what we had decided was that what we want to do with this company is part of our business plan was we're going to get it going, and we're going to leave all of the money in the company. As owners, we're not going to take any money out of this company as we let it grow. That allowed us to do 2 things. The amount of financing that we had to get was much lower, and then when we did get the financing, we were able to pay it off at a much higher rate. And at that point, we were able to fund ourselves and grow organically. And so it eliminated some of the risk that's involved in business. I talked about that for a minute earlier, and the risk involved in business. And some people really like to take a lot of risk, and some people don't like it so much. If you don't like taking any risk at all, being an entrepreneur is probably not for you. That doesn't mean you have to go risk everything on every business. I tend to be a little bit more conservative than a lot of people that are starting and running businesses, and this is an example of that, as we really wanted to be in a good cash position. As we did that, it did provide some opportunities for us. The other thing I would point out here before I move on is that one of the other challenges you're going to face is financing. How do you finance it? It's quite difficult to self-finance a business. If you're starting a new business, it can be difficult to get commercial financing because you have no history behind it. And as your business grows, that becomes easier to do. And so with this business, one of the things we did is as we got going, it grew quite rapidly. But sometimes in the business, the best opportunities are when you have the greatest challenges. And several years ago, there was a shutdown. I don't know if you guys were probably too young to remember this, but there was a port strike, and a lot of the longshore workers down there at the port would strike. And so all of this freight and these containers were getting backed up in the port, and it was affecting these companies that were trying to move their product in. And it really gave us an opportunity because the time frame that they wanted to do this. We had these companies that were saying, hey, I need my product, and I need my product now. But the challenge that a lot of them were facing is they needed their product, but they hadn't been getting their product, and that's their income, right? And so when they didn't have product to sell, they didn't have income coming in, so it was hard for them to pay for the freight. So what they really wanted to do is to get the product moved up there and then be able to sell it and then go back and turn around and pay the freight. And so they wanted payment terms that were a lot more favorable to them. So they wanted to take longer to pay us, 60 days, 90 days, even some of them out to 120 days. Because we had set up our business and we had been investing our money back into the business rather than to the owners, what we were able to do is come in and say, we can do that and we can do those payment terms, but it's going to cost you a little extra. So we were able to make a little bit more. If you're investing your money, you always want a return on your investment, and that's what we figured. And so we were able to double our business in 1 year because of that. And it wouldn't have been possible had we had to go out and get the commercial funding. Our company was still young, and I don't think we would have got the cash that we needed. And if we had grown to a larger scale with that cash backing it, we could have got some funding, and we ended up not needing it. And so that was a real benefit to us. Rather than paying interest to the bank, we earned the interest ourselves and charged that. 5 minutes? Okay, perfect. So that's Overland Logistics and kind of what we do there. So the last one that I wanted to hit on, and this is probably the funnest one, and for me, the least profitable, but anyways, we enjoy doing it, and that's Bailey Racing. And so Bailey Racing, how this started, just kind of real quick, is I've been passionate about snowmobiles and ridden my whole life, and decided that I really wanted to get into racing. My family had attended the World Championship several times, and I was just enthralled with it. And so it was actually my last year at college. I decided to take what little bit of money I had, and I bought a used snowmobile and decided I was just going to test the waters and start racing. And I thought that I was going to go there and blow everybody away because of how awesome I was, because when I was riding around here, it seemed to be pretty good. What I realized when I got there is that everybody there was probably the best rider in their area. And so competition was really tough, and it was a lot of fun for me because I got to see really where I was at and measure myself and then start to improve. I didn't go into it with the intention of taking it very far, just kind of see what it was and see if I enjoyed it. I was able to move up through the classes, and I'm now running my 5th year in the professional classes, and it's been a lot of fun and a good experience. A couple of things that I've learned through this is, first of all, again, I didn't really start this as a business either. I just started it as a hobby. But as I started going and things started growing, and I started working with these different companies that were sponsoring me and working with them and their marketing departments and working on social media, I really started to see some of the value of that. And so what I've done is I've started to take my social media and this following that's grown over the years and start to turn that into a business and to be able to use that reach that's there. Yeah. So it depends. So sponsorships are an interesting thing, and this is probably something, especially you guys that are athletes, might be interested in. Sponsorships are very individual, and so you're going to do a different contract with each company, at least in my experience. And so you can see I've got Polaris. Some of the ones you'll recognize really well are probably GoPro, Fox, and some of those companies. Others are more specific to to just snowmobiles like Mountain Tech Performance and Kpis suspensions and some of those things. But so all these companies sponsor me, and they give me something, something depending on what our deal is. So whether it's money or free products or products at a discount or things like that. Each of those is individual. But here's the thing is that I would clarify is they really don't give me anything. Okay, and this is the thing that people don't understand about sponsorship, and you see it all the time. These companies that I deal with, they're going to go in, they're going to get resumes and letters and phone calls from people on a daily basis showing them that they're the next coolest thing coming up in the snowmobile industry, and you need to sponsor me because I'm awesome. And that's just not how it works. Really, when you're working with a company as a sponsor, you're part of their marketing department. And the idea is, again, this return on investment. And so what are you going to provide as a return for them? And that's what you need to do as a sponsorship. Rather than going out saying, I'm cool, here, sponsor me. I'll put my, your logo on my trailer or my snowmobile or on my jersey or whatever. You need to go to them and say, what can I provide for you? You need to give them a detailed list of what you're going to provide for them, and then how that's valued. Then you come to an agreement on what the value of that is. And there's a couple of things that they're going to look for, probably especially in our sport. Number one is going to be the reach, and most of that happens on social media. So what kind of reach do you have? How many people can you reach and promote our products? So how many followers do you have? How much engagement do you have? How many people are going to view your posts or your videos or whatnot is really what's involved in what I'm doing. The other thing is you're really an extension of that company. And so when they put their name on, for me, on my machine, on my jersey, on my trailer, it's how is that going to look for their company? What kind of image am I going to portray? So you may be the guy that's out there winning all the races, but if you're just a jerk and nobody likes you and you just rub people the wrong way, you're going to have a hard time getting sponsors because you're going to turn people off of that brand rather than bring them to it. And so each company is going to be different too, right? Because they've got a different audience, they've got a different group of customers. And so really you're going to tailor that individually on each company. So each company, I have a different type of contract for each company that I work with. Yeah. So other questions? Okay, right here. Okay. Any tariffs or quotas? Yes. So selling into China, there's a tariff on alfalfa hay. There has been since we started the business. It's a 7% tariff. I'll go through this really quick because we're running out of time. But when all of this trade war started with President Trump and China, they increased that tariff to 25%. As I said, these are agricultural products. They're part of the food supply of the people. They eventually rescinded those tariffs and actually went back and refunded them to the importing companies. So we have dealt with that, and that could be a very difficult thing because that's something that we don't have control over. Yeah, from 7% to 25%. Then they rescinded those, went back to 7%, and the import companies were paying it. So our customers were paying that, and they went in and they actually went back and refunded those customers eventually because it was a product they really needed in their country, guys. Something they didn't really want to play games with. So, okay, thank you. Thanks for having me.